Today's guest is one of the most influential figures in the harmonica world. He's played professionally for more than 40 years, he wrote the Harp Handbook, and is a consultant for Hohner. He's been closely involved in a lot of the great developments of the instrument that we know and love. He is Steve Baker. Hi Steve, how are you doing today?
Hi, Tomlin. I'm fine, thank you, under the circumstances. Out in the country, about 60 kilometres south of Hamburg, where things are quiet and peaceful. So, yeah, could be worse, you know.
That sounds pretty blissful. Although I was chatting to Konstantin Reinfeld. I think you guys know each other.
Oh, yeah, I know I'm one of the people who discovered Konstantin. I've been following him since he was 14, so I know him quite well, yeah.
A phenomenal player, but he was saying that lockdown's still pretty serious in Germany.
Oh, fuck yeah. It's really, basically... I think the Germans handled it very well, the first wave, but then they got a bit complacent and forgot to plan ahead and didn't listen to the epidemiologists. So now we got a pretty high incidence. Fortunately, where I am, it's fairly easy. It's not a high incidence, but you know, we're right out in the country, so it's you know. But Konstantin is in Hamburg, of course, where things are a little bit different.
Yeah, it's it's frustrating everywhere. It's very weird when I chat to students in other parts of the world, and they're telling me that they're going to jam sessions and playing gigs with their bands, and I'm kind of blown away that they're able to do that. Also, slightly nervous for them because it's.
You're not kidding. I don't see any real likelihood. I mean, we're in constant contact with organisers, club owners, you know, people like this, and most of them here have written off 2021.
Wow. Yeah, that's not surprising at all.
No, it's realistic. We've had to do it with a number of events. I mean, I had a workshop coming up in 3 months in Croatia. Ain't happening. Spa is online for the second year running, and the World Harmonica Festival, I fear we won't be able to do it because I can't really imagine the organizational aspects of having 500 harmonica players all close together hyperventilating in a confined space. Yeah. You know, I mean, just just controlling vaccinations and tests and all this sort of shit, it's too difficult for any kind of organization that isn't very well staffed, you know, like extensively staffed to do it.
No doubt whatsoever. But I'm assuming that as soon as you get the go-ahead, you're going to be jonesing to do workshops and gigs and things like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've always been primarily a live performer. I do workshops. Of course, I like doing workshops. I've taught a great deal, but my main focus has always been on playing concerts. And I play, as a general rule, about, now it's not as many as it used to be, but it's still, I guess I do 80 gigs a year in a normal year, which is quite a bit, you know what I mean? It's like most weekends are gone kind of thing. So yeah, I'll be very glad to get out and play again, but I'm mindful of the problems involved for organisers because there's a whole lot of constraints which make it very, very difficult for people to put on concerts, like the necessity to check liability. You know, it's very complicated.
Yeah. Oh, it's completely insane. I was chatting to Todd Parrott about he just did a concert not that long ago, first one in about a year, and he said he was playing in a 1,500 capacity venue to 100 people who were all 2 meters apart, spread out through the venue, and it's it's not very practical. And as a performer, it's really difficult to get excited about an audience when it's like that. You want people to be cheek by jowl and.
It feels better, but for me, to be quite honest, I'm just happy to play at all for people. I mean, I've enjoyed the streams that I've done, and I think I played a total of 4 live concerts since the start of lockdown last year, which two of them were outside with people with social distancing. One was in a park, just sort of in the middle of nowhere, playing into the void with just acoustic instruments without a PA. But to be honest, I really enjoyed it because it was just nice to get out and perform, you know.
Yeah. Oh no, I am itchy. I really enjoyed watching your live in lockdown with the Baker family videos. They're a lot of fun. Do you normally play together, or is this necessity?
Well, it's a kind of bit of both, you know. I mean, my daughter Jean has been in my band since I started my own band a couple of years back, and Jeff, the upright bass player, is the bass player in my band. So if you mean the concert that we did for Spa, where I'm playing harmonica, because I had to play guitar on quite a lot of those recordings because I didn't have a guitar player. But there also my wife Nico's playing cajon, and we play for fun, you know. So she's done the odd gig, and I am looking at using that lineup in future because I'm going to be recording some new songs in a more acoustic vein than the last albums I've done.
Cool.
Yeah, I love playing acoustically, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the nicest way to play music really is without any microphones or amplifiers or anything, just like chamber music. That's how it sounds best and how you can communicate most directly, I think.
I totally agree that there's so much fun to be had doing something properly live and acoustic without having to deal with all of the paraphernalia. It's just so difficult to manage in a normal gig environment. And I'm sure you've done your share of pub gigs where you almost have to be brash and too loud and amplified to get any kind of attention happening.
Well, I usually tend to play more sort of concerty situations. And I have to say, I have no hesitation in telling people to shut up.
Nice.
None at all. If they don't want to listen to my music, then they can leave. You know, I'm not into playing for people to eat and chatter to. You know, I don't do it basically.
Fair enough. Okay, well let's go back in time a little bit and get a little bit of your origin story, because you don't sound particularly German. So tell us a little bit about how you find yourself where you are and where you actually started off.
Well, I'm a Londoner by birth of Scottish descent, and I lived in London. Apart from when I, went to study, I studied in Reading, and I spent a lot of time in southern Scotland also in my sort of late teens, early 20s. But basically, I grew up in Britain, but I'd already traveled a bit as a young hippie. You know, I went to Afghanistan overland when you still could, and did some stuff like that. And so I was always kind of, from how I saw the rest of the world, I was always an internationalist. I was never sort of particularly Anglo-centric. I always loved the idea of traveling and going and seeing other countries and meeting people from other cultures. So when the band that I started playing with in the mid-70s in London, Have Mercy, was invited to come to Germany to do some gigs in the summer of 76, I just, we jumped at the opportunity because the music scene in Britain, as it still is, was then poorly paid, and when I realized we could actually go somewhere else and be wined and dined and treated like, as if we had some significance rather than as a bunch of beggars, and even get paid, I just thought, well, that's rather nice, isn't it? So I came to Germany for 3 weeks and I'm still here.
That's brilliant. And that's... what's this? Some 40 plus years later.
Yeah, it's 45 years this year.
Brilliant.
Yeah. But I never regretted it. I mean, it's been, for me personally, very good because I've, founded a family and have always been able to live from playing music, which was a dream for me when I lived in Britain. I couldn't have really imagined it. It would have been very difficult, I think, without, having additional sources of income.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a recurring theme with musicians I chat to, UK-based musicians that, mainland Europe, full stop, seems to be a lot more caring about people playing music than the UK is, and I definitely mainly do play those pub gigs where I'm playing to people eating, and there isn't a huge amount of the kind of purposeful concert going. But it's good that you found that good place for it.
Well, I basically, when I realized that I could make a living, even if it wasn't, a fantastic living, it was better than the one I had in London. And I think the most important thing for me is the respect, what you just said, caring. Yeah. People have a different attitude to the performing arts, generally speaking, because the problem in Britain for me is that it's a very classist society. Class consciousness is very present in Britain still, I believe. And so it's like, if you're really successful as a musician or whatever, then of course people think you're great. But if you're not, they think you're a bum. And they're not treated in general, as well as in many European countries, put it like that. And that's, of course, why it's going to be rather problematic for British musicians in future due to the rather unwise decision to stop freedom of movement, because that's going to make touring in Europe very problematic. Certainly much more expensive, much more bureaucratic, but maybe impossible for, small acts, club acts, indie acts. It's not going to be easy, and I think that's going to cause major problems for an awful lot of performing artists.
Oh, no doubt, and it's probably going to go both ways. I'm assuming it's going to be complicated for European acts to come in to the UK as well. And
we don't do it because you don't get paid.
Yeah.
I know quite a lot of people who are really great and perform small concerts, club acts all over Europe, but virtually none of them play in the UK. I'd love to. I'd be delighted to play in the UK, but it's a bit difficult to do it for nothing, because the overheads you've got to pay. And so in the end, it's like, well, if I'm going to go and see my friends in Britain, then I'd rather just have a holiday than go through the grief of, playing under not particularly great conditions for bad money. It's I'd rather just have a nice holiday.
Definitely. So you moved to Germany, but let's go even further back. What kind of started the musical journey? Were you born into a musical family, or is it something that you discovered yourself?
Well, I didn't realize it, but my grandparents had actually played music on my father's side, but my parents kept this very quiet and never told me about it, because I guess they didn't want me to get the idea of becoming a musician. And I was told as a kid that in school, that I was utterly unmusical, sit at the back, shut up, and so I tended to believe my teachers until I discovered the harmonica, or more accurately, the harmonica discovered me. And the first time that I really got one, I basically was fascinated by it. I was 16, and I taught myself to play from records, and realized that maybe my teachers were wrong. Maybe I was actually quite musical, because I taught myself to play guitar parallel to that as well. Mainly also by ear, by listening to records and figuring out the chords. And I mean, I'm not a very good guitarist, but I learned parallel to playing the harp, which was very useful for my harmonica playing as well.
Definitely, and you learnt in a time pre YouTube. You didn't have it all handed to you, which
There weren't even any books then. The only book on blues harmonica in the late 60s was Tony Glover's Blues Harp book, which I looked at. I went to Dobell's record shop in Charing Cross Road in London, which was a brilliant place to go and listen to import records and that. I didn't have the money to buy them, but I listened to quite a few. And I saw this book in the rack of music books and I leafed through it, but I was kind of put off by the hipster language and the lack of general precision, and I thought, I'm not really going to get very much from this, so I didn't buy it, or I didn't nick it. So there wasn't any way to learn, and there was hardly any harmonica players around, so you couldn't really take any lessons. It's a very different time now, I mean, now there's, as you said, YouTube, but there's also any amount of literature, any amount of people prepared to share their knowledge, with others. So it's quite a different situation. In terms of learning any musical instrument, I think it's become a lot easier now.
Oh, definitely. But so is this maybe a reason for you writing the Harp Handbook? Did you feel like you needed to create that educational resource that maybe you didn't have?
Yes, definitely. That will basically have been the reason. It's like I just thought, well, nobody else has done it, so I will. And I just started working for Hohner at the time when I wrote it. And I had figured out some fairly fundamental things about how the harmonica worked from observation, like how bending and overblowing notes worked, what actually happened. And this was unknown at that time, the late 80s. Nobody could explain to you, why can you bend the draw note in hole 4 but not the blow note? Nobody could tell you that. And I figured it out. And I figured out what happened with basically opening and closing reeds. And then had the good fortune at the time when I was writing the Harp Handbook to run into the wonderful Robert Johnston in Melbourne in Australia, who's a physicist at Monash University, or he was then, and he did a paper on for Acoustics Australia, a learned journal, about what happens when you bend and overblow notes on the harmonica. He built a sort of device to simulate it, like a vacuum cleaner that blew two ways. So you could put it into, blow and draw mode. And he hooked it up to a harmonica with some sort of little mouthpiecey thing. And he found that he put in between the vacuum cleaner and his harmonica mouthpiece thingy a bicycle pump, so that you had a variable air column, right?
Brilliant.
A bicycle pump like this, yeah. And he found that he could bend and overblow every note on the instrument like that.
Oh, wow.
And he actually wrote down all the physics of it. So he was confirming what I'd basically empirically stumbled upon myself, which is why I quoted him in the Harp Handbook. He put the maths together. He actually wrote the formulas which describe it, and you can still get it. His work was used as a basis by Antaki and Barnson and people like that later on. But, for me, really, I mean, all of this sort of the academic approach to harmonica is something which I embarked on because I could, and because I can write. So I thought, okay, I'll try and put this stuff to paper. But my interest has always been in playing music, and I play music for a very different reason. I'm not interested in impressing people with my, brilliance or anything like that. It's a waste of time. And there's so many people who are nowadays much more brilliant than I am. If you listen to all of these, like you mentioned Constantine, for example, before, So that is all stuff which has never really been a motivating factor for me in the last 35 years at least, because I'm much more interested in communicating with my music. I want to touch people's hearts, and that's why I play music.
Yeah, which is the right reason, I think. There's a lot less ego in that, which is good. So you've had a kind of 40+ year career in music, as kind of more of a side player, session guy, up until...
And accompanist.
And accompanist.
I've been an accompanist basically all my life, yeah.
But then recently you started recording your own material and being the kind of the solo act. How's that been? How's that transition been?
Exciting. I always wrote songs. I've been writing songs for over 40 years, though not very prolifically. But I realized that I was never going to be able to get the people that I was accompanying to play any number of my songs, because they either wanted to play their songs or they were too much into being alpha wolves to actually tolerate anybody next to them. And I realized that if you want to do this, you're going to have to do it yourself. So I decided I would just go for it, and I took the risk of failure because I didn't know if I could sing well enough to do it, and I didn't know if the songs were any good. I just thought, well, if I don't try it, then I'll never know. So I went ahead, made the first record, which I believe got here somewhere, Perfect Getaway. Yeah. And that came out 3 years ago, and it turned out really well. I was really pleased with it, and so I put a band together to play the stuff live, and have been playing since the record came out with a band, with which I then recorded the follow-up album, The Great Divide, which, as you can see, is also available in 12-inch vinyl as well as CD. But for me, it's been a very intensive learning experience because I was being forced to do a load of things I'd never done before, fronting a band, being the main focus of attention, and singing everything as well as playing the harmonica. It's quite hard work. It's a lot harder work than just sort of kicking back and accompanying a singer. And I love accompanying singers. I've had the privilege of accompanying some very, very good ones and playing with some, brilliant musicians. So that's been very rewarding, and I still like doing it. But I have to say, performing my own material and writing and arranging it is something which I really enjoy. It's wonderful. And learning to sing better, because I always sang, but I just never really had the confidence to, develop my voice, has been a very inspiring experience. I found it's been fantastic, and I hope to be able to continue doing it again as soon as possible. But the thing is that pushes the harmonica a little bit back. It's then no longer the center, because one thing that I was very clear about is I'm never going to make a harmonica record. I've done that. I did that 35 years ago. I'm just now re-releasing the Free Fall sessions, which I recorded in 1986, which is harmonica instrumental music with 80s technology, with like sequencers and Linn drums and lots of keyboards, played by studio musicians. And I have no interest really in going back down that path, because I'm not very harmonica obsessive in music. I love harmonica, and I really, really like to use it well and supportively in a musical context. But I don't agree with the philosophy of many, many contemporary harmonica players that it should be the middle point. It's, for me, it never will be in my own music. It's something which I add if I think it'll add something to a song, but it's not something that I write songs around.
And are there new records that you've been working on during lockdown? Are you ready to kind of do new stuff with the solo material? Yeah,
sure. I've got half a dozen new songs that have come up over the last year or so since I released the last record. because The Great Divide came out in March a year ago. And since then, I've come up with a few more songs, which I'm going to start recording in about 2 weeks' time, where I'll probably play some guitar myself and then put down vocals and then add upright bass, percussion, more guitars played by people who can play them better than me, and a bit of harmonica and harmony vocals, and just sort of see how I get along. Because it's becoming both very expensive and very unrewarding to release physical albums. They're useful at gigs if you have gigs, because then you can sell a few. If your audience is as old as mine, then. But I mean, a lot of young people now, they haven't even got a CD player. Maybe they'll have a turntable, maybe they'll buy vinyl, but almost everyone under the age of about 50 today doesn't buy CDs anymore. They basically use Spotify or other download, stream formats. And so I'm trying to figure out the best way to go about it. And I'll just first of all record the music, get it so that I think it's good, and then see what the best, most effective way is to actually release it. But I'm very glad to have a good ongoing relationship with Time Zone Records in Osnabrück in Germany, which is a great independent label where they're very supportive and where I know they like my work. So, they'll continue to release it. And I'm now re-releasing, like I said, this instrumental record I made in the 80s, and I'm also intending to re-release the first Have Mercy LP, which we made when we first came to Germany in 77, which is basically raucous punk music played on acoustic instruments using blues as a medium, jug band basically. The jug band from hell, with, really like insane energy. Basically, we invented folk punk about 15 years before the Pogues.
Oh, wow. 15 years too early, do you think?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you, really. I mean, in the end, I've had the misfortune throughout my life to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So that most of the things that I've embarked on have never been particularly commercially successful. I was in a great band here in Germany in the early 80s, Tough Enough. We had a complete program of original material, some of which I've actually now re-recorded on the Perfect Getaway album, on my first solo album. Where, unfortunately, it was at the time of the Neue Deutsche Welle, which is the German New Wave, and they were all singing in German. We were singing in English. Nobody would touch us, even though it was a great band, And I've been through that kind of experience many times over, because success in popular music is nothing. It's not a meritocracy. It's a matter of being lucky, being in the right place at the right time, and then having good material. But if you're not in the right place and it ain't the right time, then it doesn't really matter how good your material is, because nobody's going to pick up on it. So I don't really worry about stuff like that.
No, and I mean, your longevity kind of attests to that. That was a far better move, and you probably have been in the right place at the right time in terms of managing to sustain a career, because very few people manage it in music. Very few people manage it as harmonica players, even fewer than other instrumentalists. So,
absolutely right. I mean, I have to say I'm profoundly grateful for it. I've been able to basically live a really nice life. I mean, I've never been wealthy, but I'm not poor, and that's cool. Being not poor
very
is
cool.
That's a pretty good state of affairs, and to have been able to do that from the harmonica is a miracle. I can only say, I'm very, very grateful. But what made a huge difference for me was also my very lengthy association with the Hohner company, which started as soon as we got established in Hamburg, because we in Have Mercy we had a lot of harmonica players. We had three at one time sometimes. Rory McLeod was a member.
Oh, wow.
If you know Rory.
Oh, yeah.
Rory was an original member of Have Mercy, and me and Henry Hagen, who's another great harmonica player, and a fourth harmonica player, Jon Eccles. We had more harmonicas than anybody ever dreamed could possibly play together in a blues context, you know. And so we needed a lot of harps because we were street musicians. We trashed instruments like nothing, you know. We would just go through a harp. Maybe the first time you put it in your mouth, it would be blown already because you had to play incredibly loudly. And or at least I, at that time, being a bit ignorant, thought that you had to play incredibly loudly, not realizing that opera singers can fill halls with without amplification. So if you learn, you can of course play much more projectionally, you know. But we trashed a lot of harmonicas, and so our manager hooked us up with the local Hohner distributor warehouse. It was actually part of the Hohner company, and I used to be the designated harmonica buyer and would go along there and buy for everybody because I would just go through them. It was a time when the quality was poor, and I would simply go through the instruments and reject 50% of them easily, and I would complain vociferously about the poor quality. And I was started doing a lot of studio work for sort of MOR, German Schlager mostly, you know, but stuff that the people at Hohner had heard of. If you say, "Oh, I've just made a record with James Last," then that does strike a chord with them, you know, or Roger Whittaker or people like that. So that gave me an in, and I was an endorsee from a very early stage, and got progressively closer to the company with the passage of time until I finally pitched them a consultancy offer, because that basically helped me very much as a separate thing, a separate source of income. And also I think it probably helped Hohner a great deal, because they needed somebody who was coming from the hands-on rock and roll-y side of the music scene rather than sort of middle of the road or harmonica trios. And I was able to fill that role basically, so that was also a big help. You know.
It feels like you became involved with Hohner and have been part of the kind of great revival of the company with the instruments getting much better quality over the last kind of 10, 15 years, especially. I was reading that you were involved in developing kind of the new marine bands, the deluxes, the crossovers. And that's a huge deal, because I think a lot of people don't realize that harmonicas weren't that great for quite a chunk of time, and that's why customizing became such a big trend.
Very true.
But I don't think customizing's quite so important these days because of the quality of the instruments coming out of all the companies now have kind of upped their game quite a lot.
Well, they've been forced to, and that was something which was, for me, really, really important, because I spent a long time trying to convince people at Hohner that you could assemble a marine band harmonica with screws, for example. You didn't have to nail it together, you know. And they were saying, "Oh, no, it's not possible because the tines of the comb are too thin." And the answer is very simple. You don't put screw holes through the tines of the comb, you know. You put them along the back. And I was good friends with the customizing fraternity from a very, very early stage. Joe Filisko and Richard Slay being the first, but also other people here, Tony Ramos and other people in Europe who were, you know, doing work based on the work that was pioneered by Filisko. And also Rick Epping, one would have to say, from the Hohner company, because Rick was also one of the very first people to introduce things like reed slot embossing and stuff like this, and also introduced the retooling, which raised the standard of the Hohner reed plates enormously. So I was in close contact with the people who were basically bringing out what Hohner should have been doing, bringing out the best harmonicas in the world. And it took a long time, but I was eventually able to convince them that this was viable and that we needed to respond to the improvements which were being introduced by customizers. And the first step was the Marine Band Deluxe, which was take a Marine Band, improve the covers, make them more stable, open them up, and seal the comb and assemble the whole thing with screws. And then I suggested, because the company had been looking for a renewable resource to make comb material, for comb material, and I suggested, why not try bamboo? And we tried bamboo. I tested loads of different kinds of bamboo laminate. And the result ended up being a Marine Band crossover, which, I think was a resounding success. If you like Marine Bands, then that's the instrument, Although the Deluxe is also a great harmonica. And for me, and then, of course, this was followed by the Thunderbird, where we basically adopted Filisko's cover design of the asymmetrical bottom cover, which I managed to convince them was the best way to go. And then I was also fortunately able to convince Joe that he should let them use his idea. And they credited him for it. And that's why his signature's on the cover. I insisted on that they have to credit him. It's something which other harmonica manufacturers like Suzuki, who've nicked that idea, have not done, I would point out, because it is Joe's idea. He invented that.
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge fan of the Deluxe and the crossover. I'm looking at a rack of them in front of me on my desk. So thank you for being involved in that.
Hey, it was a pleasure. It was actually a decent job, reasonably well done.
That's fantastic. Well, listen, I'm very mindful of not taking up too much of your time, and I really appreciate you chatting with me today. Is it okay if I ask a few questions, just quick ones, from my students, as they were excited that I was chatting you today?
Yeah, sure. I'd just like to say one thing first, if that's all right.
Of course.
Which is that if anyone is not familiar with my recorded work, as well as these two recent albums on Time Zone Records, I made 4 CDs with the late, great Chris Jones, which, as far as I'm concerned, are up there with any guitar harmonica duo that's ever recorded. They're really beautiful records. Chris was one of the greatest acoustic guitarists of all time. He tragically died very young in 2005 after we just finished our 4th album together. Those 4 albums, Slow Roll, Everybody's Crying Mercy, Smoke and Noise, and Gotta Look Up, are all still available on Acoustic Music Records, another German label also based in the town of Osnabrück, which has an excellent catalogue of, as the name says, acoustic music. And if anyone's interested in listening to some really cool harmonica, guitar, vocal, duo material, then check out those albums.
And I'll just add that everything that Steve's mentioned in terms of good stuff to check out is available in the show notes. There are links to go straight there for everyone listening.
Thank
Make
you.
it a bit easier. Cool. So this is a question from Tony, who wants to know if there will be a Kindle or ebook version of the Harp Handbook, so he can read it in the dark.
Now that would be nice, but the page format is a bit small because you've got some quite big diagrams and stuff like that. I haven't made any attempts to do this, and at the moment the publishing rights are with Hal Leonard for the Harp Handbook, so I suppose I should approach them. It's a good idea. Thanks for the suggestion. I'll see if I can follow up on it.
Cool. And we've got another question about your SBS harmonicas. So Tony wants to know what the range is of them and whether they're still available.
They've discontinued the 14-hole SBS. It may be that they did a Rocket 10-hole version. I'm not quite sure. I know I got one as a prototype, but I don't know if they actually did it as a series instrument. The thing is, the range of the 14-hole SBS is 4 octaves plus, I think plus a third. And that is because that was the format of comb and cover that they had available for the big marine bands. The large marine bands came in 2 versions, the 364 with 12 holes and the 365 with 14 holes. And this, if you imagine that you've got one in C, then the bottom octave is an octave lower than a regular C harp, and it goes up to 1 hole above the highest hole of a regular C harp. Now, I changed the tuning, but not the range. So the range is exactly the same. I simply changed the tuning of the bottom 3 holes so that they correspond to the regular bottom 3 holes on a 10-hole harp, but 1 octave lower. I mean, it's a cool idea. I used it quite a lot on my records with Chris. But when I got more into tongue blocking, I discovered that the dimensions, the physical size of the instrument just made it really quite hard to enclose properly. And I kind of drifted away from using it because I've spent quite a lot of time as a sort of late starter with the tongue block, intensively figuring out how to do it reasonably well. And the SBS format, the big marine band format, is just rather clumsy. So I haven't played it for a while personally.
Interesting. Okay, and our final question, which is potentially a little bit more philosophical, depending on how you take it. But Mike wants to know how does one avoid sounding sameish when improvising? Does it just come with experience / skill / knowledge, or do you have some kind of rough plan that you start with?
That's a very, very good question. I would say that unless you're really particularly brilliant, it takes most of us quite a long time to reach a point where we learn to express ourselves both creatively and in a varied way. Because a lot of what musicians tend to do is just repeating licks. And I know some very, very good musicians, really brilliant, technically brilliant musicians, who unfortunately tend to repeat the same licks all the time, again and again. Only people don't notice because it's very fast. I name no names, but there are people I've worked with who have been exemplary in that respect. And so I reckon that one of the things that I often do, obviously I do this as well, I fall back on a certain range of stock options. But the thing that you want to do is, first of all, to figure out different ways of combining scale notes, because most of the music that we play is modal music, right? It's not using many different scales or different chords. It's basically in one key and using a mode, like let's say the Mixolydian mode or the minor pentatonic mode or whatever. Yeah? And so one of the things that's really good to learn is different ways of moving around in that scale so that you don't just have to go like, you can also go same notes, yeah? But I'm simply putting them in a different order. So it's like take a phrase and then vary it. So, you know. Yeah, well, this is all just, it's the same notes, but you're just sort of moving around in a slightly different way between them by playing alternating scale notes, for example. Bam, ba, bam, like, instead of. Playing alternate notes, for example. So it's a matter of how you approach the supply of notes from which you are selecting your impro notes. And that is, like I say, in modal music, it'll be the notes of the scale you're using, blues scale, minor pentatonic, or whatever it is. And the other thing is that I try when I'm going to start a solo, because with songs, if I play them regularly, I have arrangements. And some solos I will play pretty much the same, but often I deliberately just try to make my mind go blank and go into the solo without knowing what I'm going to do. Because there, if you are relaxed and in the flow of the music will tell you what to play.
Excellent advice, and probably a perfect place to conclude a very enjoyable conversation. Thank you so much for spending the time with me today, Steve. It's been great. So like I said before, I'm putting all the stuff that you mentioned in the show notes for people to easily get to it. Is there anything anywhere else I should be directing people, websites, Facebooks, that kind of thing?
Yeah, my website is stevebaker.de, although it's not much use to you at the moment because there's no gigs. I'm on Facebook as Steve Baker Harmonica or as Steve Baker. You can, send me a friend request if anyone's interested in corresponding. I'm fairly easy to reach. I do online lessons should anybody wish to, though not a great deal, but if I've got time, I'll do it. And is there anything else? Any other publications or anything? Yes, there's something I wanted to say. I released 3 volumes of blues harmonica play-alongs, which are real high-end practice material for diatonic harmonica players, not just in traditional blues, but in quite a wide range of related genres. And I have now finally got the rights to the English language versions as digital books, where I've got the entire book as a PDF and the music as MP3s. And what these are collections of instrumental titles, which I wrote and transcribed for harp, with a great band accompanying them. And on the record, on the MP3s, you have 2 versions of each song, one with my harmonica and one without, as a playback to jam along to. And in the PDF, you get the complete notation and a blow-by-blow account of how I actually did the various things in the track, the technical bits. So if anybody is interested, Blues Harmonica Play-Alongs Volumes 1 to 3 will be available from Time Zone Records, from their online shop, within the next few weeks. I don't think they're there yet. I just made the deal yesterday, so it's going to take a little while to get them up. But I hope that they will be available within the next few weeks. And this is, I think, the only material I've heard on this level of quality, where, like I say, cool tunes, a great band, and a complete analysis of how to deal with the tunes. So if anyone's looking for practice material, check out Blues Harmonica Play-Alongs from the Time Zone Records web shop. It's timezone-records.de, I think, but you can find it quite easily.
Cool. I'll link that up as well. Well,
please,
thank you so much.
That would be great. Thank you, Tomlin. It's been nice talking. I hope it's been interesting for anyone who's listening. I'd say hi to everybody in Edinburgh and wherever else you're listening from. And hope that it will be possible to meet in person in the not too distant future.
Fingers crossed. I mean, I'm definitely going to be organising a workshop as soon as I get the go ahead from the government. They have me on speed dial. I'm the first person that's going to be told.
Hey, great.
All right, take care. Bye bye.
Then you too, Tomlin. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of my harmonica podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on your podcast service of choice. And if you're ready to take your harmonica playing to the next level, then you should check out my online harmonica school over at tomlinharmonicaschool.com. Happy harping!